Round three. Well, last time I used the wrong potentiometers again, 2 times in a row. So hopefully this third time will be the charm. These are the ones that I'm going to use. As you can see, they're a little bit better designed to fit through the through holes, whereas these, I'm not exactly sure what these are for. I'll have to do some more research. So that set me back about $4.50 for that blunder. I'm not really worried about that. If I use these in another project, then that will not really have set me back anything at all. And so same thing with the Echo Blue. I've got the potentiometers ready to go for those. So what I'm going to do is just get these out of here and then clean up and then put these in. I got the potentiometers out, but I could have done a better job. I lifted a pad right here and, well, luckily it's right next to the transistor that it touches. So I'm just going to make a nice solder bridge right over there when the time comes, and that will take care of that. No other lifted pads. I didn't use low melt solder on this one. I totally should have. I used low melt solder on this one, and the potentiometers pretty much just fell right out. The reason why I didn't want to use low melt solder is because it just leaves a big mess that you have to clean up. And as you can see, it's better to have a mess to clean up than to deal with lifted pads. I replaced the potentiometers on the Echo Blue. It's time to test one more time. Seems to work pretty well. And the important thing here is to always test after you make major changes to make sure you're not introducing any new errors. Troubleshooting is hard enough as it is, and once you get something working and it stops working, it's pretty heartbreaking. So it's really important to make sure that nothing else happened along the way. Next step for this one to get into the enclosure, but next up we've got to get the new potentiometers in the Super Squisher. And it seems to be doing a pretty good job compressing. I think I've got this on full blast, and I'm also using, there we go. That's the super loud overdrive effects. And there's normally a huge difference. It already sounds a lot more tame, and now you kind of start to hear it get loud, but it gets cut off. This compressor is definitely working. I'm going to call this a success. Well, bad news. I don't know what to say. I was over here earlier this morning, and I had really nowhere to put these things, and I've got both of these circuits kind of up high up here. I don't know what happened, man. I was reaching for something over here, completely unrelated, and my arm just barely touched one of these wires, and I felt something fall like a feather. And I looked down, and it was my Super Squisher. My Super Squisher fell all that distance. And this particular potentiometer got kind of banged up pretty bad. I tried to bend it back into shape, but then I thought to myself, man, that was a hard fall, and these transistors in that CA3080 are kind of delicate, and sure enough, I think I killed it. So I'm going to try a few more tests and see what happens, but oh, this is bad news. Wow, I don't know what I did, but I'm pretty sad right now. Usually the best thing to do in a situation like this is to just kind of walk away. Maybe even not even touch this for 24 hours. And I got a lot of troubleshooting to do. I guess the best way to troubleshoot this is just to start with the input and then just to follow the signal through and see what's happening. Okay, the first thing I checked the botch job that I did here with the lifted pad and thought that maybe that was the culprit because, yeah, that's going into a transistor and that definitely would cause it. But no, it's the connection's still there. It's fine. And that is the one potentiometer that was bent the most, so probably destroyed this potentiometer. It might have been okay when it took the fall, but maybe after I bent it up, I probably, if I could explain, like on the inside, there are these plates that swipe back and forth, and they probably got separated. So I probably just need to buy a new potentiometer. What a bummer. So I got the potentiometer out, and I'm sort of checking it out over here, and it's definitely dead. It's probably happened when I was trying to reshape it, which is a bad idea. I should have removed it immediately. But you can see when I'm here kind of pressing it down, it sort of works, but it's always going to be compromised. So at this point, this is probably a dead potentiometer. Of course, when I did the jumper the first time, these potentiometers were not in the way. Now they are. So I'm going to try to get this jumper on here with the potentiometers in the way, and hopefully I'm not going to burn anything in the process. That's my little jumper. And man, that was pretty hard to get back in there with these three other potentiometers in the way. So I'm going to take it over here and test. And all right, we're back in action. All right, so lesson learned. Lesson learned number one is when you have PCB mounted potentiometers, don't drop them. Luckily, the transistors and the CA3080 operational transconductance amplifier did not break. That's the good news. I'm going to have to get a new potentiometer. I'll replace this one later. What a mess, though. How many times have I replaced the potentiometers in this thing? I guess it also goes to show the resilience maybe of these things. I've even got a lifted pad, and this is still working. Okay, on to the next step. The problem that I have is that this template is not precise, and it needs to be precise. So where it says 32 millimeters here, that is not 32 millimeters. However, it is 32 millimeters roughly between these two potentiometers, any one of these two pairs, and same lengthwise, 27 millimeters. So what I think I need to do is just measure this out myself using a ruler and a Sharpie and some other, straight kind of ruler type kind of edge things to get this thing as precise as possible. Because when I drill these 4 holes, if I mess up, these are the dodgy tools that I'm using to make my marks to drill the holes. I'm going to take this out into the garage now. I'm going to now attempt to drill the holes into this enclosure. This is what I'm going to use. I'm going to start with a small, very, very small bit. Probably what I should do is a drill punch into these, but to tell you the truth, a lot of times I have just as much luck getting the hole right where I want it with the drill, going fresh into it, than using a hole punch. So I'm going to take my chance and not use a hole punch this time. The trick here is to use a very, very, very low revolution and push down very, very, very hard. I wish I could show you that, but I'm only using one hand right now, so you'll just have to trust me on that one. If you want to know more about drilling into metal, look right here on YouTube. There's a lot of tutorials right here on this very subject. I got my pilot holes drilled, so the next step is to use the stepper bit to get everything down. I'm just going to do this one step at a time because I forget exactly which level to get to. This is pretty darn close. I think I can work with this. I may need to readjust some of the potentiometers. One in particular is a little crooked compared to the other ones, and that might do the trick. Same drill as before, haha. We'll start with this small one. We'll just get the holes going, and then we'll switch over here to the step. And as always, use your safety goggles. Just really slow and push down really hard. And I should be using my other hand to support the enclosure, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to now attempt to drill the holes. Into this enclosure. This is what I'm going to use. I'm going to start with a small, very, very small bit. Probably what I should do is a drill punch into these, but to tell you the truth, a lot of times I have just as much luck getting the hole right where I want it with the drill, going fresh into it, than using a hole punch. So I'm going to take my chance and not use a hole punch this time. And if this doesn't work, then I guess I've just kind of like tossed this enclosure to the wind, unfortunately. And I'm not going to try this again for the other ones that I have. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find a good drill template instead. But here we go. The trick here is to use a very, very, very low revolution and push down very, very, very hard. I wish I could show you that, but I'm only using one hand right now, so you'll just have to trust me on that one. If you want to know more about drilling into metal, look right here on YouTube. There's a lot of tutorials right here on this very subject. I got my pilot holes drilled, so the next step is to use the stepper bit to get everything down. I'm just going to do this one step at a time because I forget exactly which level to get to. Here goes. And slowly but surely the holes get a little bigger. Okay, this is pretty darn close. I think I can work with this. I may need to readjust some of the potentiometers. One in particular is a little crooked compared to the other ones, and that might do the trick. Same drill as before, haha. We'll start with this small one. We'll just get the holes going, and then we'll switch over here to the step. And as always, use your safety goggles. Just really slow and push down really hard. And I should be using my other hand to support the enclosure, so I'm going to do that right now. Got them drilled. Let's see if everything fits. And yes, this does leave a mess behind. I think this one fits even better than the first one. Okay, so what will be next is to drill all the other holes. I need one here for the stomp switch, one on each side for the jacks, and one for the DC jack for the power. And I need to think about how a battery is going to fit on the inside of this thing as well. And you may be wondering, like, what's up with these lines that I've drawn? Well, that's going to be the next part also, is sanding this down and then getting a primer on it. So don't worry, all that's going to go away. The next step is to get the rest of the hardware components fitted into the enclosure. So I've got to carefully drill holes for 2 1/4-inch jacks, a 3-pole double throw stomp switch, a DC jack, and an LED, which I don't have here because I always leave the LED out to the very last minute. Here is the other pedal, and I've got these components already placed in here just to give me a rough idea if everything is going to fit. So I want to use a battery, and the battery is going to give me all of the trouble in the world, because if I didn't have a battery in here, I'd have a whole lot more room. As it stands, things are going to be so crowded that I've got to be so careful to drill these next holes. If I make a mistake, the enclosure is toast. And then finally is the DC jack. I really want the DC jack to be at the top. And as you can see, it's going to be a super tight fit. It's going to be hanging like right over the PCB. And you got to also imagine there's going to be wires coming out of this. So I've got to be real careful with that. Over here next to it is a pedal that I worked on before. This was a success. And this is just kind of a comparison. So here you can see it's got the battery. It's got the same kind of stomp switch, which uses these really cool little PCBs, which kind of helps to clarify things. I'll go over this later, not now. And here, everything, not everything, but the DC jack and the 2 1/4-inch jacks are what we call top mounted. And that's great, but I'm not going to be able to do that over here. There's just no way that the jacks can fit in up here. Now, where is the LED going to go? The LED really is supposed to go right here in the middle, but that's not going to happen, I don't think. I can give it a shot, but if you can see here very carefully with, where is it? Here it is. This LED, it's just a little, the wires coming out are just a little too high, and I can't really see what's going on underneath here, and I think they're probably going to come too close to touching. Maybe, maybe not. Now to think about it, you know what? I changed my mind. I think I am going to put the LED here. Otherwise, I would put the LED on this side or this side. Probably a lot safer to do that. So that's still a decision I'm going to have to make. If I do put the LED underneath here, on the Pro, it's out of the way, but the con side is that it's under the way as well. So I'll need to put that in, wire it, have the wires coming out the back, and then fit them into here as an after fact. So again, lots of things to think about. But the first thing we're going to do is focus on this DC jack and get this thing fitted in. Well, as they used to say in the dark ages, wish me luck. I think that fits pretty well, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do the next one. The wires are going to cause a little bit of trouble, but hopefully not too much. All in all, I hope it was a wise decision because, as I said, I'm going to go ahead now and do the next one. By the way, I went about 10 millimeters from this side to drill this hole. For the next one, I'm going to go about 9 millimeters and a little bit left of center, depending upon which way you look at it. And the reason why is because there's a voltage regulator kind of in the way on the PCB that's going to be mounted, and I want to try to steer clear of that if I can. All right, that's another success. I'm happy with that one. Now, once I wire this in, getting it fitted in is actually going to be a bit of a challenge, but I got a few tricks up my sleeve for that when the time comes. Only 4 more holes to go. This next one is going to be fairly critical, however. I want to get the battery in here, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how far up to go. I'm going with roughly 31 millimeters, according to this pedal that I put together a few months ago. There's a battery inside of here as well, and I'm also using the same stomp switch daughter board helper, and I believe this is going to work out pretty well. And I promise to talk about this in a little while. That looks pretty good, but I might be a little bit too high. I've got plenty of room for the battery. What I'm worried about now are the side jacks on the left and the right. How am I going to fit those in? Pardon the background noise. I'm measuring this thing over and over and over again, just trying to make sure that I get it right, because man, I really don't want to get this one wrong. I've got very, very little room in here. Now, you may have noticed that I have removed the little helper PCB for the stomp switch. I still promise to talk about that. It's right here. If I don't have room for the helper PCB, then so be it. I won't worry about it. It's just a nice convenience. But I've got to get these 2 jacks into here, and I'm going to go out into the garage and get that done. 1 down, 1 more to go on this one. I cut this one very, very close, but I think I'm going to be able to get that PCB helper thingy onto the stomp switch. Lessons here are to always use a drill template. If you're not provided with a drill template, make a drill template. If you don't know how to make drill templates, learn how to make drill templates. Or you could be crazy and risky like me and just try to eyeball it, I recommend using drill templates. On to the Super Squisher, and unfortunately this one is going to be even more of a tighter fit. And to add to the difficulty, this one is at a slight angle and in the worst way, because the angle gives less room for the larger TRS jack and more room for the smaller TS jack. And I will go over the difference between the TRS jack and the TS jack. You may be asking yourself, wait, it's a guitar pedal. It's a mono signal going in, a mono signal coming out. Why is one of the jacks a TRS? And I promise I'll go over that too. No problem with that one, but that one was the easy one. I always save the hardest one for last, so please wish me luck on this one. And thank you so very much for wishing the good luck, because that worked. All of this fits. Now all that is left to do is to put the LEDs into both enclosures. I think I'm going to put the LED down here to the left or the right of the stomp switch. I could put it underneath the PCB, but that's going to make it hard to get to in case it needs to be repaired. I have decided to install the LEDs to the left of the stomp switches, so I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes for these LED holders now. Just a slight change of plans. After installing the nearby components, I've decided to move the spot of the LED holder just a little bit down. I believe that is going to work. You can see the LED holder right there to the right of the stomp switch, just below the TS jack and just above the battery, right there where my thumb is. I believe this is going to work, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other one the same way. And there they are. All of the holes have been drilled, and I think this is going to work. I'm going to prepare these for painting, which involves sanding them down and priming, and then getting some layers of top coat on, and then thinking about what kind of design I'm going to do. So there's a lot more work ahead of this. This is going to take a while, so you might want to grab a snack. We're going to talk about wiring the stomp switch. The stomp switch is going to be a 3-pole double throw switch. First of all, let's talk about a regular single pole double throw switch. The way that this works is we have 3 lugs, a center lug, and then 2 side lugs. With the switch in this position, the center lug is now connected to the left lug. We'll do a quick flip here. Now, with the switch in this position, the center lug is connected to the right lug. You may say, hey, you just flipped it. Well, I can't do that, so sorry. You get the point. Now, the stomp switch is 3 of these. And that's essentially what we have with this stomp switch. The only real difference is that I only need to throw one. It's a single throw. Whereas with these, this would technically be a triple throw. This center represents the stomp switch. We have the 9 solder lugs on the back, and they're represented here. This is going to be the on position. And in this position, we're going to say that the bottom 2 rows are connected. We've got this pair is connected, this pair is connected, and this pair is connected. Our input is going to be coming in on a tip ring sleeve jack. And the output is going to be going out on a tip sleeve jack. Both of the sleeves of the jacks are going to be wired to ground, which is represented by this symbol. The input is going to come in on the tip, and it's going to be wired to this lug of the stomp switch. In the on position, this pair is connected, so the input signal will flow from here, and then we will wire this lug to the input on the circuit board. For this pair, this lug is wired to ground, and this pair is connected. So this will allow ground to flow to our status LED, whose positive end will be wired to the circuit board. And the circuit board will provide the voltage and the current limiting resistor for the status indicating LED. But when in the on position, because this pair is now connected, this will provide the ground connection to the LED, causing it to turn on. Meanwhile, for this pair, the output signal coming from the PCB board, from the PCB, will be wired to this lug, which is connected because it's on, and this lug will be wired to the tip of the output. And this does three things. This gets the input to the PCB. This connects the circuit for the status indicating LED, which turns it on. And this connects the output signal to the tip of the output jack. We're going to skip over the power for a second and go to the off position now. In the off position, we're going to say that the top two rows are now connected. This pair is connected, this pair is connected, and this pair is connected. Incidentally, they don't have to be labeled A, B, and C, but some people do that. So in this position now, because this pair is no longer connected, the input to the PCB is now going to be connected to this lug, which happens to be connected to this lug, which, because this pair is now connected, connects to ground. So this effectively grounds the input signal going into the PCB. Meanwhile, however, we have a jumper wire going from this bottom lug all the way to this top corner lug. And this is where our input signal comes in. Because this pair is now connected in the off position, this will be wired to the out. It's still wired to the output of our TS jack, and this will give us what we call true bypass. This will allow the input signal to flow through just a couple points on the stomp switch. 3 points on the stomp switch, then directly to the output tip. Meanwhile, on the other two pairs here that are no longer connected, our status LED is no longer has a connection to ground, so it effectively turns off. And our output will now be isolated completely. This, in essence, turns the pedal off, but there is one problem. If we have a battery connected, the off position of the switch will not disconnect the battery. The battery will stay on. And this is why we use a TRS jack. Now then, before we talk about that, we'll talk about the DC jack. This is the DC jack. This bottom terminal is the center pin. These two terminals have a normally closed switch that only opens when you insert a connector into it. So with the battery connected and nothing connected into the DC jack, the battery supplies power to the board. Meanwhile, the negative terminal of the battery is connected to the ring of the input jack. When I insert this connector into the jack, the sleeve of this connector will short the ring and the sleeve terminals of the jack, allowing the battery to complete its circuit to ground. What this means is that when nothing is connected into the input jack, the battery cannot have a connection to ground and it will not power the circuit. When I do insert the right kind of connector, in this case it has to be a TS connector, because there is no ring. Effectively, the ring is now the shield. This will create a connection to ground for the battery, effectively allowing it to power the board. If I were to use a TRS jack, however, the battery will not have a chance to turn on. I can quickly demonstrate that perhaps. There is a battery inside of this pedal. However, as you can see, it won't turn on. There's nothing connected inside of it. Now, just then you saw where the ring is coming across and giving it power just for a second. Probably not a good thing to do very often. If, however, I use the tip sleeve connector, now I can power the pedal up and turn it off. However, in the off position, the pedal is not off right now. Only the LED is off, you see. Because the switch is in the off position, it's not allowing the LED to have a connection to ground, not allowing the LED to turn on. It's not until I actually remove this connector, now the pedal is off, the battery is protected. And that is how we achieve battery protection. Finally, what was the deal with these little daughter boards that I was wanting to use? Well, these are just very handy. In the first place, they give you a connection from this terminal to this terminal for you, as well as connecting these two. They also give you a chance to put a circuit protecting diode in here if you want to, if your actual main PCB doesn't have one for whatever reason. It also has, but almost the same 5 solder holes as what is on the PCBs that I'm using right now. The problem is they don't line up. Ground is not where ground is, and so forth. But if they were, I could use a nice looking ribbon cable to connect this to the PCB, and it just looks really slick and professional. Right now, my jacks are just going to be in the way of that. They're going to be touching it and rubbing up against it, and I'm just worried about that. So I'm not going to use it for this project. And finally, I hope this explains why guitar pedals are center negative instead of center positive. If we tried to do this trick with the battery protection trick, with center positive instead, then that would mean that we would need to make the sleeve and the ring hot on the TRS jack. And we need for the sleeve to be grounded, not hot. We need for it to be grounded so that in case there is any interference that hits this cable, the shielding that's protecting this cable is wired on both ends to ground, and that interference will be what we call shunted, forced directly to ground instead of going anywhere else. So we really can't do this trick with the center positive configuration. I am going to use 220 grit sandpaper to sand the enclosures now, both the top and the bottom side. And as soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to hopefully spray paint them with a primer. It should be warm enough outside right now. It got a little bit chillier since the rain yesterday, but I think it's above 55 degrees, and that should be enough for the paint to dry in the proper amount of time. And if there isn't any blood and there aren't any tears, well, there will always be sweat during this stage of the process. Take really close notice at the lack of shine that these boxes have right now. And even if I kind of get around with different angles to get the light on different ways, you can see they're very dull. And very dirty too. That's the thing. There's a lot of dirt already embedded in this aluminum. It should be easy to tell which one I sanded and which one I did not. Now I'm going to use what's called some naphtha, which is just paint thinner. I'm going to apply some to this rag, and I'm going to wipe off the surface area and clean it. I really should show this to you out there in the sun, but I'm not going to do that. Sorry, I'm too lazy. You're just going to have to take my word for it that the one on the right is super shiny. While I'm sanding the top enclosures, I will go ahead and prime the bottom. And I'm going to use just this primer. The first thing I do after applying a coat of paint is clean off the nozzle with some of the naphtha or the paint thinner. It's really a good idea. When this thing cakes up, it probably becomes unusable at some point. The second thing I do is get some kind of a timer going. I'm going to wait for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to apply another coat. In the meantime, let's kind of take a look at what I've done here. And it seems okay. This is just the primer. I did notice that I did get like a little kind of sputters on this one over here. You may be able to see them in the camera, maybe not. But I'm going to go back and sand this down after I apply 2 more coats. And by the way, these little Antimi media players are just wonderful. That is 3 coats on there. I think that looks pretty good. We'll see. No crazy stuff yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry for at least 2 days, maybe more. Yeah, at least 2 days. And then I'm going to sand it down and get the actual color, whatever it's going to be. One of these is going to be blue for the Echo Blue, and I haven't decided what color for the Super Squisher yet. Hopefully this will give you a better idea of the difference in sanding it and not sanding it. You might be able to see I've got some horizontal strokes going this way where most of them are vertical. If you're looking for getting a really good brushed surface, look no further than Notes and Volts. He's got a good video on how to do that. I'm not really interested in that because I'm going to paint over these. I just want to get all of the blemishes out, get them smooth, get any like dirty kind of stuff in there that might get underneath and cause the paint job to corrode as the years go by. And while it's still somewhat warm and there's still sunlight in the sky, I'm going to go ahead and get these 2 painted with the primer. Nothing left to sand. All I'm going to do now is just wait for this to dry. Same drill as before. Wait 10 minutes. Apply another coat if everything's okay. Wait 10 minutes. Apply another coat again if everything's okay. If at any point something goes wrong, I have to stop, wait 2 days, sand it back, and then kind of start over from wherever I was. 3 coats of primer successfully applied. And yeah, as soon as I said successfully applied, a bug landed right on top of it, poor thing. Didn't stand a chance. I try to save them when I can, but they get coated in paint and there's just no saving them. At any rate, you may not be able to see it, but there's a slight blemish right there where the poor sucker met its grave end. And I'll just have to sand that out. It should be fine. I just feel sorry for the poor sucker. You may be wondering why I don't transport these inside and keep them protected from flying insects. The answer to that question is sudden change in temperature. I've already tried this in the past, and I've suffered, unfortunately. It is now 3 days after I applied the primer to these enclosures. Now I'm going to apply the first layer of paint. I'm going to use this black enamel just as the first layer. I still haven't decided what color I'm going to make these. The Echo Blue is definitely going to be blue, and I only have a little bit of the blue left. So I'm going to do at least the first one, maybe the second coat as well with the black, and we'll see how that turns out. Before I apply paint, though, I'm going to sand it down lightly with this 320 grit sandpaper. And then after that, I'm going to apply just a little bit of the paint thinner. And what this is going to do is it's basically just going to break the surface down and allow the new paint that I applied to it to bond. First coat of 3 looks pretty good. Once these dry for about 10 minutes, I'm going to apply another coat, wait 10 minutes, and apply another. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for these to dry, I'm going to start sanding the top enclosures, get them ready. When sanding the paint, go real lightly with it. You can see here the amount of paint that I've already taken off with the sandpaper. It does quite a good job. You can also tell if it's too wet when you're doing this. These seem to be dry enough. That's the third coat. That makes a total of 6 layers of paint so far. I did sand back some, and I think that's the idea of why we do 3 per. It's because when you sand back, apply the next one, you don't come back to the metal or to the next layer of paint that you last left off with. So now I'm just going to let these sit for about 20 minutes. I'll move them out of the way and hope that no leaves blow up over this barrier. And then I'll move on to the top enclosures. I think those came out pretty well. They're dry, ready to go. It does feel a little bit chilly out here, but maybe that's just my imagination. I've got these ready to go. I probably should check the temperature first. It's probably more than 50 degrees out here, so I feel safe to go ahead and spray paint these now. That is 3 layers of black paint on top of 3 layers of primer. You might be able to see a little bit of runoff on the side right there from the top. I'm hoping to be able to sand that off. We shall see. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this video, and I'm going to conclude everything in part 3. Wait, this is part 3. Part 4. Conclude everything in part 4.